I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Good evening, Internet. We have returned from all other places, or our cryotubes underneath Kimmy's yard, to talk to you about RPGs, because that's more fun. Anyway, welcome. This is Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Season 34, Episode 16. I am Kadave, and I'm not Kimmy. She's not feeling great, so she's taking the night off. And I was handily available to make all the computer things compute.
It's a good thing you were, because I don't know what's happening here at all. I would just be lost. I would they tried to teach me how to produce once, and I think then they were like, "You're not doing this anymore." Hi, I'm Emily St. James. I'm here to talk. That's what I'm here for. I was on the schedule and I made it. The last time I forgot, and I'm here. I made it. I put it on my calendar. I'm Emily. Hi.
And I'm Verk from the Discords, and I am not in the theater, or in the theater. We're talking about theaters earlier. I am not in the studio today. I am remoting in from the wonderful Washington D.C.
It is so tempting to just reach over and put my hand on your head.
Yes.
Just see what
Go ahead, it's fine. I washed my hair. That's it.
Right.
There we go.
All right. In today's episode, we have emails from Wes from Indianapolis asking how GMs can facilitate creative character goals. An email from Eric from New Jersey sharing why Session 0 is important. And from the archive in 2020, but I think it might be 2018 today. We have another one.
Yes.
But if you'd like to contribute a question or a story to the show, please email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com or post it in the mailbag channel on the Discord. Please write in. If you have any questions, even if it's something you have been toying with in your head and you haven't formulated it into a whole massive diatribe, throw something at us. We like to yammer on about all kinds of RPG stuff. That's why we're here. So just give us a blurb, because the selection of emails is running thin. We've only gotten a couple in recently, and it would be vastly important for us to have something to talk about every week, because it is a huge undertaking to try and write a weekly podcast from nothing. And that's why we depend on you, our wonderful listeners, to help us out and give our lives meaning. So please do. Coming up, announcements. Game days are fan organized through our Discord. Game playing marathon is happening on November 2nd. Visit the Happy Jacks Discord. I think if you go to happyjacks.org/Discord, it'll give you the information right there. And you can sign up to run games. You can sign up to play in games. The people running those games are so cool. And some of the creative ideas I see every time, even though I'm outvoted every time on scheduling and I never get to play. It's always perfectly aligned to places and times that I can't be there, and I'm always sad because I see such cool stuff. But you should go check it out. It's pretty awesome. I already talked about sending in some emails. That would be great. Questions, comments, anything. You can ask us questions about the actual plays that you also see appear on this network, especially past ones. You can always be like, hey, we have a question about that game that Dave was in a year ago. We were just listening to it now, because new people find things all the time.
Send in your Emily fan chats, your Emily fan theories. Just put those in the Discord, put them in an email. The best thing is when there's emails, they on this show, they print them out. I can go like this, like I'm David Letterman or something. So we want more, so I have more paper.
All right. And now our indie designer of the month for October is Audrey Stoles, a.k.a. Lady Tabletop, she, they. You can find her games at ladytabletop.itch.io and hopepunkpress.com. She runs a solo game podcast called Alone at the Table, which you should check out. That does sound cool. This week we're discussing lost luggage. You are a piece of luggage lost in transit on the way to your destination. Based on the Lost and Found SRD from Jack Harrison's Artifact, this game asks the question, what does our luggage see when it passes out of our hands? Lost Luggage is a solo journaling game for one player, designed to be played in 1 to 2 hours with plenty of opportunity to tell a new story every time you play. You'll choose your luggage type from 5 playbooks: the backpack, the suitcase, the hard case, the oversized, or the lockbox. After you've answered some initial questions and described your luggage, the gameplay loop begins, taking you through 3 acts and multiple handlers, people who carry the luggage for a time. And on your journey, you'll have the opportunity to document changes to yourself and the world around you. Available for $10 at ladytabletop.itch.io. It sounds fun. I'm not usually a journaling person, but that I can already tell is hilarious. All right.
I love the idea of it.
Go ahead. What was that?
I love the idea of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that's such a unique thing, and especially if you've flown enough or whatever, and you see the things that your backpacks go through or whatever as they fall off the planes and all that kind of stuff. You know, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
As someone who doesn't do a lot of gaming right now because I have a toddler, and the toddler is always running around and getting into things, solo games have been a real godsend. So that sounds great. Yes, if you have small children, highly recommend solo games.
For sure.
Before we get into the mailbag, I have questions then, because I've never done any of the solo games. Like, what do you like about them, just in general? Obviously not about this one because you probably haven't played it, but just in general.
Well, I mean, I'm a writer by trade, so like I am already like predisposed to enjoy a game where I sit and write in a book. But I love that it is designed to sort of take you through like a weird hybrid of writing a story yourself and playing in an RPG, you know, where you have like limits on the kind of story you're going to tell, but then you have a lot of range of imagination within that. I frequently love my 2 favorite in this field are The 1,000-Year-Old Vampire and Koriko, A Magical Year. And they're both just very good at getting you to tell stories that might not be in your wheelhouse, but that will feel of a piece with what the game wants you to do. But also I like that, like, it's not just you're given a writing prompt. You're often given mechanics to deal with things that you come upon in ways that like help you figure out how you're going to approach these problems. I think just like I often do it first thing in the morning as just like I'm waking my brain up for the day. Now I can go like work on the stuff that I should be getting paid for. But it's it is very much like a thing that I am predisposed to like. But I do think that if you're really into RPGs and you just haven't had a chance to play because for any reason, it's a really good way to handle that. I also like, actually, I have been increasingly recommending Koriko to parents who have children who are like RPG curious. I think that experience is also good, where you and the kid are playing a solo game together, effectively turning it into a duet. But like, I found that can be very gratifying, especially if like your kid is like 9, 10, 11.
That's cool. Yeah. I like that idea
really
a lot.
cool.
I also really resonate with the idea of coming up with a story with the constraints of a rule mechanism around it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way I can operate creatively. If you just let me off the chain, then I'm just gonna be like, I don't know, I blow bubbles and fly away. Like, who knows?
There are a lot of them out there that are just kind of in the space of like, it's just like a 1-page prompt and you're just sort of supposed to go from there, or they're not terribly well designed. But the best of them, and there's a wonderful newsletter called The Soloist, which is just dedicated to reviewing solo RPGs. The best of them really are as good as any of the other story games out there. So I do highly recommend them, but you have to wade through a lot of stuff. So it's good to have a guide.
That's awesome. All right, let's do it. Mailbag number 1.
All right, that's me. Dear Happy Jacks, I'm writing to share some game mastering thoughts that have recently solidified in my brain, and I hope they will spur comment and counsel from your fine panel. At least some of us are fine. But first, some background. Several months ago, I wrote an urban crawl, point crawl, Pathfinder campaign and began running the game with my players. 3 months later, I was bored. I didn't understand why I was bored until I had the aha moment. I wasn't being challenged by my players, and I wanted to be challenged. First of all, never want to be challenged from your players. It's just always gets so much worse. Okay, back to the thing. I've heard from givers of advice that game masters want to be challenged, but I never understood what that meant until I realized that I'd been game mastering on easy mode. While there has always been some storyline flexibility in my campaigns, they've been built out with my primary storyline in mind. My players provided me side quest stories based on their characters' backgrounds, and their storylines always flowed towards predetermined points and an eventual and mostly pre-scripted conclusion, like a video game. While I love building out the campaign, when it came to running the game, there was less of a thrill of discovery for me. Within a comfortable set of boundaries, I always knew what was going to happen. This was partly because I knew my players well enough to anticipate any curveballs that they could throw at me, but also because I had put enough padding into cushion any unexpected events, be they killing a useful Nemesis NPC or the destruction of the campaign MacGuffin. This sort of approach made sense when I was still new at running games, and I needed to look like I had done my prep work. But almost 2 decades later, I should have been pushing myself. This challenge resolved itself into an answer: a player proactive campaign. I announced to my table that the campaign was going to undergo a soft reboot in the coming weeks. I requested that each player supply me with 3 character goals, of which one goal needed to tie into another player's goal. I explained the difference between a good character goal, i.e., I want to save my town from demon hordes, and a bad character goal, i.e., I want to be the world's best bard. Explaining that goal failure should have consequences beyond my bard feels bad, I then suggested that they look into an interesting people, organizations, myths, artifacts, and places in the default Pathfinder setting of Golorian for inspiration. It worked. While not every goal that my players came up with was stunning and unique, they were not ideas I had previously considered. Thus, they provided me with a fresh challenge by fleshing them out into something that would fit our game and that the table would find appealing enough and want to play through. Now, not only do the players have something to look forward to with every session, I have the fun of developing an ever-rotating cycle of goals to keep me engaged through the rest of the campaign. In conclusion, my request to you, our hosts, is an answer to a question. What advice would you give for game masters looking to facilitate creative character goal creation? As I mentioned 3 paragraphs earlier, I encourage my players to investigate the setting and find a piece of it that they thought was interesting, and propose a way to interact with it. But I think there may be a better approach that I'm not seeing. Thank you, and all the best. Wes from Indianapolis.
Interesting. Yeah, I am someone who doesn't do a ton of prep ever. I basically, when I sit down, I have like an idea of how things work in the world, but I tend to play a lot of like PBTA games. And in PBTA, the first session 0 is like, here's my character's goal. You know, you often come out of that with a bunch of creative character goals that are already set in stone that the GM can then play with. So like when I say I don't do a lot of prep, what I mean is I play a lot of games where the players do the prep for me. Like inherently, that's how it works out. So we're talking about like Pathfinder, which is a system I'm not as familiar with, but it does feel to me like in games like that are a little more focused on, you know, I think the GM often has a little bit more power. Power is the wrong word there, but you know what I mean. They have a little bit more storytelling weight in a way than they do in certain other systems. I think that it is very easy to get out of to get into a space where you're like, well, this is my story, and I'm kind of shoving everybody through it. And I think like a good way to think about it is just ask your players who they are when they're not here, when they're not in this story. And like that way you're not necessarily saying, I need you to come up with goals for me, because it feels like you're giving everybody homework. And like it obviously worked for Wes, so I don't want to like badmouth it. Obviously it can work in certain situations, but I do think it's like so much of character goal stems from the characters themselves, and the more you can tell people to let their characters breathe and to be like, well, what's this guy's kid like? What's this guy's dog like? You know, what did this guy love to do when he was a kid? What's this woman's favorite song? You know, the more you can build that out, the more that goals will start to suggest themselves to you, perhaps. But again, I don't do Pathfinder as much, and I do D&D a bit, but very rarely. I only like games that are about people crying. So
I've seen a lot of crying at D&D tables. I'm just saying.
this is true, yeah.
You know, and I think what Wes said is good, right? Of this is a lot of us start that way of, I want to have this like a video game. I want it to have pre-scripted a lot of things. I want things to lead to the things that I prepared. And I think there's not a lot wrong with that in a lot of ways. But I think you can also go the other way of like Graham, who's been on the show a few times, who's like, prep is death, right? There's a big conversation about that on the Discord. But, you know, I think both things can be very true. I think that we can over prep, and I think we can under prep as well. And I think that the idea of just interacting with your characters and seeing what they come up with, things like Decima, right? Like the Kimmy's Decima or whatever, or connection questions in PBTA games, I think go a long way to building goals very organically with your players. The more you know them, like Emily said, the more that, you know, things come up.
For sure. I tend to lean into the same kind of prep you're talking about, Emily. Like, almost all of my prep work for a game happens before the game starts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what big story I want to tell, and then where those characters are in the universe and what their goals are. And then let the players get involved and start to introduce them to things, but then like just see where they go with it. But at the same time, if I've got my villain, he's working on a schedule. You know, things are going to happen. If the players just ignore the things that lead to that direction, well then, you know, somebody else gets killed.
Yeah.
You know, the serial killer strikes again. That kind of thing. So that's the kind of prep that I do. It's more about knowing the world and what the characters I put in it want than it is specific things. Now, I understand with like D&D and Pathfinder, you need to do the prep of like encounters because there is a balance, like mechanically speaking, that you don't want to throw, you know, an ancient dragon at your level 4 party. I get that. So you do have to figure out, you know, challenge ratings and all that stuff to make that work. But you can kind of prep encounters to have on hand, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You can have like, well, okay, I know they're in an area of the world that has a lot of goblins, so I'm going to prep some goblin-y encounters. I'm in the area of the world where, well, now they're not goblins anymore. Now they're bugbears. Okay, I can prep a bunch of bugbear stuff. Or some story with goblins and bugbears. Maybe they're fighting over territory nearby. You know, things like that. Like, have that stuff ready to go if the players go that direction. But I tend to almost always follow the players.
Yeah.
Like, if they find some weird nitpicky thing that I accidentally said and they latch onto it, even if that wasn't at all part of the story that I had planned, but I just said like, oh yeah, this Undertaker that you're talking to has green eyes, and the psychic lady that you talked to 3 sessions ago mentioned something about the owl had green eyes, and now you've connected those dots, and I didn't ever mean to, and now we're on a weird, what's this Undertaker doing seances at night with the dead? Who knows? We're going to tell a weird story, and that's what I'm into.
Yeah. I
But-
tend to be more in the prep is death version of things, but also, I play in a lot. Again, like when I ran a campaign for here based on Kids on Brooms a couple of years ago called Hexbreakers, before I had a child, and like I went into that with like the idea was it was going to be about the witches who couldn't get into what we called the British school, which was very obviously Hogwarts with the serial numbers filed off because we wanted to tell a story about trans inclusivity within a Harry Potter-ish world. And I was like, I have that. And that was what I went into session 0 with. And then the players came up with stuff. And then I went into session 1. I was like, I had 2 things. I was like, I know there's this girl and there's something weird about her. I don't know what it is. And I know that to solve for the fact that players are frequently not here, that it's going to be easy for people to like switch between universes. And therefore, if a person's not there that week, they're just in a universe where that person doesn't exist or is off doing something else. I had those 2 things and I was like, I'm going to see what happens. But again, that's not to everybody's liking. I think the best thing you can do in any situation, and this is what availed me there, was I knew the game really well. Like I knew the system really well. Knowing how the system works really well will save you every time. And I think honestly, sometimes that's better prep than like sitting down and coming up with a story. Even for something like D&D, knowing the monsters you can throw at someone in D&D, it helps you make things feel a little bit more organic often. And I think that's when players often have the most fun.
For sure.
I agree. And also Hexbreakers was magnifique. I
Thank you.
loved the whole thing. It was one of my favorites. But talking about like what Wes is saying here, I think it's interesting how we all kind of defaulted to, oh, well, let's talk about prep here, as opposed to a lot of what he's asking, because he's asking about goals and ways to keep his characters, connected and those kind of things, and they're so interlaced of the way someone's helping someone find their goal as their character versus finding us prepping something makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I think Wes is going through that really awesome part of GMing, right? I think everyone who's GM'd and starts going into games like PBTA or more story games, they all have that aha moment, right? That aha moment of like, I'm not actually in control, right? Like that's such a great feeling when you realize that you can pick up what someone put down, that they're all of a sudden they have this goal of doing, becoming maybe not the best bard, but as he mentioned, but saving the village. Well, I guess now we're going to be talking about demons and how they're destroying the village. Like let's go. And that's such a great feeling, and it makes GMing so much more fun for you and for your players. Both people love it.
Yeah, I think it is always, I think honestly, the thing that Wes says in here that's most applicable is saying what a good goal is, which is like a good goal is something where if you fail, there are consequences, which I'm just quoting Wes here, but I thought it was a good way to put it. Whereas, I want to be the best that ever was. It's like, yeah, I guess if it doesn't work out for you, that's too bad for you, but who else cares? I think that is, just a very good thing to say to your players at the start of a game, at the start of a session, especially in a very long running campaign where it can get kind of samey week after week after week, is to say, oh, here's the thing I really care about now. That gets everyone energized, I think.
For sure. Yeah, I ran into the prep wall that I wasn't prepared for when I ran the Blade Runner game here, because the game is set up to be run as like you're hunting down, you're solving a crime, a mystery. And I was like, I have to do a lot more prep than I'm used to doing because I'm sitting down with 4 intelligent people that are now fighting against my mystery plot. And I know they can outthink me. So I have to figure out a story and still try and make it satisfying for them to solve the mystery. Like, okay, I really need to, okay. Like, I was very stressed out about that. Like, that was, I suddenly felt like I asked the holodeck to create a opponent worthy of defeating Mr. Data instead of Sherlock Holmes. So like now suddenly Moriarty's on the loose and knows how warp drives work. Like it's a problem. So I was very stressed with that prep, but that was kind of the first very heavy amount of prep I did because I was like, I need to come up with a villain and what he's doing and how he could accomplish I sort of wrote little vignettes, and if the players didn't catch the person by here, then the next event happened. Because the game is very organized into they work shifts and have to take downtime sometimes, and it's all very scheduled because they're working as Blade Runners. So they're reporting to the police and they work for somebody. So getting that into line and then figuring out, okay, how would this villain manage to kill somebody that lives in a high security apartment building and get out? Oh, okay, here's a way that could work. Cool. And there were a couple of times that I thought they were humoring me, but they were like, no, we really didn't get it. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. I pulled it off.
Yeah.
I don't think I can ever do this game again because I did it once. That's it.
That was a really fun campaign. I had a blast checking it out. Also, everyone I know who runs mystery-based RPGs drinks a lot. They're just like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Or some other substance of choice.
Yeah,
It's
for real.
so much stress. Yeah, I applaud you.
I can't do it. I can't do I've tried running mystery games a few times, and unless it's something Brindlewood Bay, whatever they call it, Carl from Brindlewood games, where it's there is no answer, and then we come up to go with it together. That's the only way I can do it because it's so stressful. I know people like Steffi on the Discord, right? That's when they have the brain for it, and they have it all laid out, and it's all super complex and wonderful. And I'm like, bless you, that's amazing, rock on. Can't do it.
Yeah. I played in a campaign of Basin once, which was very fun, and I still was watching the GM be trying to dole out clues, and I was like, you have done so much work for this, and I could never possibly.
All right.
Shall we move on?
I think we're ready.
I am reading letter 2. Dear Kimmy and whoever she kidnapped to be on this week, hi. Greetings to all from the Garden State. That's New Jersey. So I was posting on the Discord, which everyone should join, agreed, and I mentioned a Shadowrun campaign I was in. A few of the fellow Happy Jacks Discord people said I should write in a letter or that they wanted to hear more. So here it is. Honestly, it's not all that exciting, but it is an excuse to reminisce about an old character. It was my college years in the early 90s. One of my dear college buds was a man named John, whose nickname was Psycho. He was a metalhead who hailed from New York City. He had his idiosyncrasies, like walking around campus with a hockey goalie stick that said "Impact is imminent" on it. Maybe a little odd, but overall a nice guy who went out of the way to help his friends. Love this man. I love John. I love Psycho. We played a few tabletop RPGs together, and then he informed me his New York City buds were coming down to visit, and they were into the idea of me joining them for a session of Shadowrun. While I owned the first edition book, I had only had one chance to play previously, and I jumped at the chance. John told me the GM said to create a character and we would just integrate him into the group. Mind you, at no point was there a discussion about who was already in the group, what type of character they needed. There was no communication as to theme or anything else. This was not the wisest of choices. And I know this wouldn't really be a session 0 because they already had an established campaign, but I keep thinking how session 0 type communication would have helped. So being a nerd, just as much as a metalhead, I put together a street mage that was one part DC's John Constantine and another part the Fourth Doctor from Doctor Who. I hope complete with scarf. That was the right Doctor, right? I got that right? That was the right reference?
I believe so.
I did it. The street mage had a sleight of hand trick where he would snap his fingers and a Pringle would be there, which he would promptly eat. Well, we got to the table and I met the other players and their characters. Each character had more cyberware, weapons, and leather than the prior character. They were all dark, motherless, rage-filled beings prepared to take on any mission the most violent way possible. And then there was my street mage. While all of us shared a love of metal at the table, we certainly did not share a certain type of character design. Now, I would love to turn this into a horror story and say my night was ruined, but the New York City metalheads loved my character and the humor I brought along with it. We had an incredibly fun time going on a run. They loved the Pringles bit. Heck, the next time they came down to visit and have us play again, one of them brought me a container of Pringles as a gift. So there you go. Happy ending overall, though I realized after that communication was key. You know, things like tone, theme, and what the other characters may be. However, even though I haven't seen those guys in decades, thinking of that night still brings a smile to my face. Psycho, I still keep in touch with. How can you not keep in touch with Psycho? Even though he lives across the country, and I still consider him a good friend. Since then, I always had a session 0, even if I didn't know what they were called until I started listening to Happy Jacks. So, out of curiosity, have you ever been in a situation where you thought, I should have had a session 0, or thankfully, I had a session 0? Anyway, I wish all of you well. Stay gaming, stay tipsy, and stay diverse. Mugs held high. Eric from New Jersey.
Cheers, Eric.
I love Eric's emails every time, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just floored by the group of metalheads from New York that are like, yeah, we're going to play Shadowrun. I think that's awesome.
I'm struggling to think of a game I would be find metalheads more likely to be playing. Like, obviously, you're like, well, they'll be in a fantasy game, but I do feel like Shadowrun is a uniquely like metalhead kind of
Sure,
game.
yeah. I think, thankfully, I had a session 0 every game.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot and will not do an RPG without one, unless it's a one-shot. And even then, the first 30 minutes-ish, or maybe even 45 minutes, is usually the session 0 of the 4-hour session, where, okay, everybody's picked what character they're going to play, and now we go through the little... You know, if it's a PBTA thing, go through the playbooks and make our choices and make our connections, or whatever, that kind of thing. Yes, I would love to play the Dallas RPG with a bunch of metalheads around the table. I totally agree, Jason. It would be the greatest delight to have that happen. I still need to sit down and write a modern episode of Dallas to run, because that game, oh boy, has some issues, but in all the best ways of it was the 80s and people thought terrible things about all kinds of people. So, and as the first licensed RPG on like a film or television project, it deserves its little spot in RPG history.
It's kind of interesting. I think I didn't play RPGs in the 90s. Family was squaring the Satanic Panic, right? So I had never played until 10 years ago. But if it's any guess on how most of people that are new to the hobby are, they are all very edgelordy, wear leather, and going to murder everything as the only solution kind of people. So I guess it makes, especially back then, this was probably a reasonable thing at most tables. I'm sure Eric was the outlier with his Pringles as opposed to the other way around. But I think that's great. And I think that I wonder if he would have had a session 0 and was been like, hey, I want to do a Pringles character. And they would have been like, ooh, I don't know. Can you be a little bit more serious? So, I mean, who knows? But I've never had a bad experience with a session 0, right? Like I've always, every time I've ever had one, I try to have for anything over two, sessions. I think that they're always positive. They always help you understand what everyone wants to play, what everyone wants to do. And I think it works out for the best. I think it really keeps everybody cohesive, which I think is such an important part of role-playing games, right? Because when you're not cohesive as a group of people and players, that's when you start to have inter-drama and problems.
If someone told me they wanted to play a Pringles character, I'd be like, you mean you want to have a giant mustache? Is that what we're talking about? They're talking in the chat about Metalheads playing Good Society, the Jane Austen game, and I love this idea. I want it to happen. The epistolary chapters are going to be amazing. The Metalheads are going to be like, and then I found the dark skull of Gathaman or whatever. And I sent it to you because I love you so. I
had the string quartet learn to play backwards.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm like you, Verk. I got into the hobby about 10 years ago because and I grew up thinking it was satanic. And now I realize it's just like very normal and strange. So I have only ever played in, I guess you'd call it, when I talk to people who've been playing RPGs a long time, I guess you'd sort of call it the like post story games era, sort of post the discussion that was going on about game theory in like the mid 2000s and sites like The Vault and so on, that have greatly influenced how we play every game, including D&D and Pathfinder and so on and so forth. And like, it's not like these things weren't happening in the 90s, but it sounds like in the 90s it was a little bit more, you sat down, the GM had a thing, and you all just kind of like came up with characters, and then if connections form, they form sort of organically, as opposed to now we're kind of like, oh, I'm going to come in and we're all going to have this web or whatever. And it feels very weird to me when we don't do that, even in a game that's explicitly set up to build that web across it. So I think, yeah, I've only ever played with session zeros. That's it. I have like sat in on friends' campaigns and been in one session, but this was often like people I knew really well. So I like would come in with something I knew they were going to click with. One thing I often think is helpful in that situation is ask whoever's like running the game, or one of your friend who's in the game or whatever, what's a thing that like would help this story, to have someone pop in. My most memorable one was I had a friend, she was running a Monster of the Week campaign. They've been going on for a long time. And she was like, I'm going to start wrapping this up. It was in the middle of the pandemic, so everybody was doing virtual gaming. And she was like, can you come in? And I was like, what would be best for you? And she was like, well, this one character has been searching for their mom this whole game. Could you come in and play the mom? And so that like gave me something to build from. And then of course I went in a totally weird direction, but it was like, that was the nuts that sort of grew into the tree of like what that became. And I had a great time doing that. And like, then I don't know what happened. I left and I assumed that they did other things. But I do think if you're coming into that situation, it's worth asking the one question of like, what's going to be most helpful? Because again, it sounds like in this story, everybody rolled with this character. Everybody had a great time. So I think that often we artificially limit ourselves in ways of what we think will be acceptable within a story. So it's worth just being like, what's the tone? What's like, how can we like make all of this fit together more than like, how can I come up with the thing that's going to perfectly fit what's already there?
Yeah, I did play RPGs in the 90s. It was mostly Rifts. And we had no connection to each other's characters at all. We just wanted to murder things.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, that was a symptom of being a teenage boy and playing a game that had wild damage statistics and things like that in the book that you're just like, yeah, I love this idea. That's great. I want to shoot bigger guns. But like session zeros now, I don't want to play without them. It was just period, full stop. Even though I did have one session zero that got me more hate than anything I've ever done on the internet. When I made Mr. Clean as a superhero. And you can all go back and watch Just Us Heroes. It's on the channel. But playing masks, I kind of had the idea from Mystery Men of like corporate sponsorship of like superheroes, like Captain Amazing in Mystery Men, yeah. And I liked the idea, and I thought, well, yeah, okay. So I played the Legacy playbook in masks, and turns out my mom had hooked up with the previous Mr. Clean, and that's where I came from, but I was raised just by my mom. I had no idea. And then as a teenager, I started getting the clean powers. And it was the story of learning that legacy and all that. And that was the story I wanted to tell. But so many people messaged me on Twitter and sent me an email and all this stuff about, I can't believe you would go in and everybody made these cool characters that were pretty serious, and were telling an interesting story, and then you were going to be this goofball that wanted to be Mr. Clean. It was so dumb. I hated it. But I managed to turn him around playing the game because it wasn't ever my intention to be a goofball. I just thought it was an interesting idea, and yeah, okay, the powers were a little goofy. Like, I shot cleaning rays and stuff like that. But, like, I was still telling the emotional story of a teenager that suddenly finds himself losing all his hair. And
I was going to ask. That seems like a real trauma.
right, yeah, like that's but a lot of people were upset. For me, that was early in my PBTA adventure of trying out those games, and I was just sort of seeing what would happen. But a lot of people were very protective of like the tone of, I want this to be a serious exploration of like teenage angst through superpowers, and don't screw this up by being a goofball, Dave. Don't, you know? And I'm like, okay, I hear you.
I do think sometimes people take masks and monster hearts and put them a little too close together. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of how they connect those in their head. What about your other players though? How were they I was there, I watched the whole thing happen, but like, how did they respond to your goofball?
Everybody
thing
was
with Mr.
fine,
Zero?
and we talked about it at the table. Like, even before we switched on the camera, I was like, hey guys, here's kind of my idea. Is that cool with everybody? But and everybody at the table was totally like, yeah, that sounds fine. That's great. And everybody at the table had amazing characters, and I was excited to play with them. And, you know, I think watching Jason's character move closer and closer to not being around anymore with the Doomed, I think, playbook, like that, until I played in the One Ring game, that's the closest I ever got to crying on camera for a character. And then the One Ring game came, and it really happened. It was a mess. I was just wrecked. But yeah, like it was that game and that care that everybody put into their characters that made it awesome, and it was great. And it turned out to be one of the best RPG experiences I had. But yeah, a lot of people got upset with that Session Zero.
I want you to put teen Mr. Clean in a Monster Hearts game. I want that to be sexy teen clean.
Sure.
No, I think if you look at your favorite movies, your favorite shows, your favorite books, the tones of them are always all over the place. You know, the great ones, any of your favorite whatever you can think about, they have so many different tones that are in the same thing that are working in harmony. Games should be that way too. Games should be broad enough to encompass a character who seems a little bit like comic relief, a character who's got a really tragic backstory, and like they should have enough breadth to capture all of that, because then it makes the comedic relief automatically have a more serious side. It makes the tragic guy automatically have a more a lighter side. You have to like that makes the story feel more like real life. And for as much as I love Session Zeros, I do think sometimes it does a lot of that work ahead of time in a way that like can limit the discovery at the table. Although I think in general, I would rather have that much prep ahead of time than not. I do think sometimes you kind of go in with like, well, this story will be this. And I miss that sense of discovery sometimes.
Yeah, I hear you. It's an interesting feel.
But yeah, never take my Session Zeros away from me. I will.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's actually one of the reasons I dislike running one shots as a general rule, is because you don't have that, and so you have to like stick that concept of session zero into that first 30 minutes of your 4-hour slot, and you're just like,
for sure. Yeah, I've still speaking of which, I've still never actually played Monster Hearts. I didn't get in the game that we ran here, and I'm just like, yeah, I'd like to play it sometime. I don't know if I want my first time playing it to be on the internet, but maybe. I don't know. We'll see it.
I played one of my favorite campaigns I was in, which sadly was cut short, was I played a Stranger Things themed Monster Hearts hack, and I had a blast with it.
All right.
Yeah, it's a great system.
I feel a little bit like Stu of like, do I really want to relive high school issues, right? But on the flip side of that, I had never done a lot of emotional gaming until very recently. Have I had anything? I was able to play in a game with Rose and Heavy Metal Jess and Sam, and it was like a very it was a very emotional thing, and it was different for me. And it was like, oh, this is actually really fun. It's a neat way to do it, but still, I think Monster Hearts is really intense. I don't know. I'd like to try it, I think, but definitely not streamed. Definitely not at a con game, you know?
So we're streaming our Monster Hearts campaign from Strategicon. We're all of us in
Right.
it. Great. Okay.
Let's
I'll
do it,
start. I'll
yes.
start prep.
As a one shot.
Yeah.
All the way.
Just throw all the stuff in there that's gonna make it hard. For sure. What else? I was gonna say something else, but I forgot now. Oh well. No big deal. That's at 2:00 this morning. I'm gonna wake up and be like, damn it! But right now I'm
We'll just edit it in. Just
Yeah.
edit it in.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll just sneak back over here and click stream and just be like, that's what I was gonna say, and then turn it off. Yep.
Kimmy won't notice. Just do it.
Either that or the police will show up because like suddenly they heard some weirdo going in their gate at 3:00 in the morning. All right. Well, I think let's move on to mailbag number 3 from the archive of 2018 in the time before time. It feels simultaneously last year and 50 years ago. All right. Hey, Jackers. Listened for a long time and often thought about sharing this story with you, mostly as a way of getting some frustration with RPGs out of my system. I'm now motivated to actually compose a message by the discussion in Season 22, Episode 20, so you can see how far back this was, about GM tactics that lock down players during the game. This sad story came about because of one of these game features that risks removing players from the fun. First, I want to set the stage. This was perhaps one of the grandest campaigns I've experienced over 35 years of gaming. It was a Pathfinder adventure path, another topic discussed previously, that we made our own. It was one of the first games in which we used online blogging as a supplemental storytelling medium, and we dug right in. That's cool. There was intrigue, intercharacter conflict, unintended necrophilia. Oh. Where's this one going? Intercharacter relationships, unrequited love, a fallen paladin reincarnated as a kobold to redeem himself. There are a dozen stories that might be worthy of an email in their own right. Suffice to say, we were all very invested in the characters and the plotline. As one of the most prolific contributors to the online blog, I think it's fair to say I was more immersed in the story than ever before, and unfortunately, ever since. Much of that immersion came from my character, the reincarnated and eventually redeemed paladin, who rose to that state I hear writers discuss. He seemed to take on a life of his own. His actions flowed from characterization and felt like they sometimes even surprised me. I worried at times that my prolific writing storytelling risked dominating the narrative, but it often seemed to inspire my fellow players in their own stories and characterizations. Then came the final climax, a battle with the grand villain who had been plaguing our company and kingdom for years of game time. A foe that my paladin was sworn to defeat and who was vulnerable to the artifact blade claimed through the storyline. Our company was well prepared, but so was our foe. After crushing her minions and fighting our way to the inner sanctum, we engaged the Fey villain to finally put an end to the destruction and earn peace and prosperity for our people. The desperation in the creature's eyes was palpable, as she realized the danger posed by my blade and the power of our company. She sent forth another swarm of minions, as my holy warrior called on the full might of his goddess's wrath to guide his blade. Then she cast Maze. For those of you that don't know the specific mechanics, the spell sends the target to a pocket dimension to wander in a maze for up to 10 minutes. There's no way to avoid this effect, no save, no resistance. Each round the target can make an intelligence check to escape. They need to roll a 20 on a 1d20 plus their int modifier. The paladin's intelligence was an 8. Rough. Which means I needed to roll a 21 on a 20-sided die to succeed. Or I could wait 10 minutes to return from the pocket dimension. That's 60 combat rounds in Pathfinder. My GM was kind and ruled that an intelligence sword could help with the check, which meant that I only needed to roll a 19 or 20 to return to the game. But luck was not so kind that night, and my entire part in the climactic battle of the whole campaign consisted of wait 15 to 20 minutes for everyone else to do their actions, roll dice, and fight. Roll a d20, fail to get a 19 or 20, repeat. The paladin returned to combat some 30 seconds after the battle ended. It was not one of my favorite gaming moments. I'm going to add a qualifier for this story. I don't blame anyone for the outcome. It was just an unfortunate consequence of a small aspect of the game that highlights an unavoidable lack of perfection. The spell was listed as part of the BBEG's repertoire, and it made total sense for her to use it to neutralize one of the most dangerous threats. I suspect the GM immediately realized the problem with this tactic and tried to mitigate it with the allowance for the intelligent weapons contribution. Had I not been so discouraged and disgruntled in the moment, I could have still enjoyed the combat, cheering for my fellow players and making suggestions as they barely managed to defeat the bad guy in a dramatic pitched battle. Instead, I sulked in disappointment between failed die rolls, and I don't even remember what happened in the battle. So what, dear Jackers, did I learn from this? I am now a huge opponent of any single GM action, game mechanic or not, that removes a character's ability to contribute to a scene or battle. I avoid using save or die mechanics or any other tactic that removes all chance at contribution. That doesn't mean that I pull punches or limit consequences for character actions, but I try to make sure that I don't risk completely removing someone's ability to contribute with a single action on my part. A knockdown fight where someone is eventually knocked out is fine. So is a save or suck effect that might reduce their effectiveness for a while. But a single spell that just removes a character from action without recourse, not in my game if I can help it. I also learned that I am still something of the sulky, temperamental teenage boy that started playing those games in grade 7. I've struggled with my enjoyment of the hobby since that time, often feeling like I'm going through the motions without feeling it. Sure, there are good moments, and we have a fun and a few laughs, but I struggle to find that spark of our earlier relationship. The love of the hobby. I guess what I'm saying, it's not you, it's me. Maybe we should see other games, take a break, just be friends. Anyway, that is my sad story. I hope this sheds some light on the potential downside of effects that lock down PCs, and encourage others to think about using mechanics or any other decision that can remove someone's ability to participate in the action. Thanks, Gord, from the part of Canada that doesn't hate bodily noises. Well, good for you, Gord.
I think I'm looking at this as a GM. I think that I would have come up with a way to bend the rules, basically, to have the character come back in at a particularly dramatic moment, or a moment, or they come back in and they're sapped in some way. I think that Gord's sort of like, here's what I've learned from this, is really smart about that. I also have never played in a campaign longer than 12 sessions. It's just I cannot fathom it going on that long. So I maybe should sit back a little bit for some of this.
I'm currently in a D&D game that we just had our 96th session.
Hey.
That we have pretty much played almost every Thursday night since the pandemic.
Wow.
We've taken a couple of breaks, but we come back around to it. I would feel bad if I were the character in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I was a GM and I did that before I thought through the consequences of it, I would probably have improv something like, there's monsters in the maze that you can fight, and when you kill one of them, it does something to the bad guy and distracts them a little bit, or gives them disadvantage on their next roll, something.
Yeah.
So it felt like even if you were stuck in there, you were maybe still contributing to the action in some way. That's probably what I would have done. But yeah, I mean, I can see how that would make you feel discouraged and not really want to be there. Especially in tactic-heavy games, especially you've got minis on a map and people are moving around with all the combat rules and all that. And it takes a long time. Look, 15 minutes, he said in the email, is pretty generous for how quickly you can get around the table in some of those combats. But I hear that. I that's one of the problems that I've had with the D20 based games is if you get on a streak where you're just not rolling well to do whatever you're trying to do, it feels very discouraging and drudgery to keep trying to fight that, okay, cool, we're gonna go fight that guy. He's wearing a lot of armor, but I think we can take him. Oh, I whiffed.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I spent my actions and I put my spells in line to buff my attack, and I rolled a 2. Well, I missed. Great. Cool. All right, and it comes around again. Oh, I rolled a 4 this time, but it's still not going to hit his 23 armor class. Oh, okay. Well, here we are. So a couple of bad rounds, and everybody starts feeling bad. The rest of the party even starts going, oh, man. That kind of thing. So it's always a danger of those tactic-based RPGs that you can get into those traps.
Yeah, and I think but also some people really like tactic-based games. They really like D20 systems like Pathfinder or whatever, and they really want that highly tactical, like playing, Baldur's Gate, right? Like they want that whole process. They don't mind a combat taking 2 hours. I can't stand it, but I understand why people like it. But and I think older D&D had a way, or Pathfinder or whatever, had a way of having things that made sense mechanically that aren't fun. Save or die can make a lot of sense mechanically. It can create all this pressure, this like situation they stepped on, they put their hand in the orb of obliteration or whatever, right? Annihilation. Those things make sense. They're cool, but they're not fun for the character. And I think that's the best thing that Gord got out of this is like we can do fun stuff still in tactical games and things with still making it fun. Save or suck instead of save or die. Or right now, the chat, everyone's talking about all these different other options they could have been doing there, right? What about if you're playing a video game? If you ever banish in a video game, the game wouldn't just be like, pause 10 minutes, come back, and you can do it. Then you can start playing again, right? It'll be like, oh, you go in there and there's a demon in there that you have to fight. And once you break its concentration, it lets you pop in or whatever. So there's options there for it. There's things you can do if you think a little bit on your feet that can still be cool, still banish you out of the room. You're not hurting the boss anymore, but at least you have something to do while you're in there, as opposed to rolling a D19 or 20.
Yeah, a single roll is your only option to escape. That's rough. It's not a fun time, especially with no immediate recourse.
Mm-hmm.
Like no chance to avoid the start of the spell. Like that's just an automatic, well, you're flushed down the toilet this round. Figure it out.
You know what the number one thing that helped my D&D game, because I ran a D&D game for like 2 years. Not exactly my, like really D&D, but close. But I put bennies in it. I put thinking bennies from Savage Worlds in it. And it gave players that thing of like, oh, I just missed 3 rolls in a row, to be like, screw you, I'm going to use a benny then, and I'm going to make this freaking hit. And it gave the players a feeling of control a little bit that really gave a lot of, just made the game feel like it just made more sense.
Sure. And I'm not saying that I'm hating on the tactical combat games either. Like
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun playing them and figuring out how to defeat enemies on a tactical board. Like that is also fun. It's a different experience than telling a story game, but sitting down to do that, if that's what I know I'm in for, is great. Like if I sat down to play, Monster Hearts and suddenly we're in a tactical combat for 2 hours, I'd be very confused and upset. But
I want to see tactical Monster Hearts because I think it would not be combat and I think it would disturb everyone.
that's in that other section on Steam. But like that. But when you sign up for it, you know what you're in for. That's part of the fun in that way. And that's okay. It's just, I much prefer mechanics that are interesting rather than exclusionary. Like,
Yes, my one shot is tactical Monster Hearts, but sexy.
Oh man,
You move your claw
This-
how many
this-
spaces? Sorry.
this
Okay.
game is
So
getting
now-
even more difficult to grok in my head, and I love it. All right. Anything else on? Well, here's the thing. This is an older email, but I certainly hope, Gord, that you have found your fun.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I don't give up. Just try something different. Get out there into the world of story games and see how that sits with you for a while.
Solo journaling games.
Try,
I'm
yeah.
just bringing everything full circle.
And see what you can find out there. Because, I mean, I am not an original 1970s D&D player, okay? I know I'm often one of the old men around here anymore, but I'm not that old. But compared to what gaming was even back in the 90s when I started, there's so many options. The world is your oyster now. And it's so much easier to find people to play games with all the options of online gaming and being able to play like that. It's great. So just if you're ever out there and you've tried an RPG and it wasn't to your taste, try and find a different group. Try and find a different game. See what's out there, because it really is, for me, such a fulfilling hobby. Like, to just sit around with friends and tell stories. And honestly, kind of like the oldest hobby that humanity has had, is sitting around a fire and telling stories to each other. So, get with the program, I guess. It's my advice.
Embrace your humanity.
Yeah.
Your-
It's a much nicer way to say that. Thank you.
And it's not that you're going to be like, oh, I'm never going to play D&D again or Pathfinder or whatever. It's just like trying something new, experimenting, seeing what you can take over from it and put it into a way that's going to make it fun for you.
And I'm not saying abandon something, but sometimes it's about having variety, you know? If I'm just sitting and I've only been reading sci-fi novels for 2 months, sometimes I like to switch it up and read a political thriller or a fantasy something, just to have some spice, you know? And then I go back and pick up another sci-fi book. But that's me. That's okay. Anywho. Anybody have anything else to add before I get on to the end?
No.
Good?
No.
All right.
Oh, can I just remind again about game days on November 2nd? This is the first time I'm going to get to play in it for ever. I've never been able to play in a game days, I don't think. So I'm very excited. And I'm going to be running a game. And if we are the only place in the whole world where we have more GMs than players. So please, you don't have to run anything. Just come and play. We want you to come and play with us. So it's a great place to do it, and it's a blast. So come check it out on the Discord.
Like I said before, so many of the regular people that are running games on the game days thing, even just their little blurbs for the game signups, I'm like, oh, dude, I want to play that game. That sounds amazing. And then I'm like, oh, look at my calendar, and I have to be a responsible dad and not leave my children at the park.
Every time I see Always Never's put up anything, he has a great blurb. There's some crazy game that he found or whatever, and I'm like, yes, I want to play, and I can never play. I've only been able to play with the guy once, and it was such a great time. So
Cool.
come and join.
All right. So, with that, thank you for joining us for season 34, episode 16. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Audrey Stoles, aka Lady Tabletop. You can find her at ladytabletop.itch.io and hopepunkpress.com. And check out that luggage journaling game, because that makes me laugh. Like the brave little toaster, but luggage on an adventure.
My next character is named Samsonite. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Oh, yeah. And then, the running into characters like the Lost Jacket from London Fog that's very snooty. And, like, it's just, my brain's going on all that, for sure. Thanks to our chat mod, James V, for always keeping our chat room a safe place and an awesome place to hang out. Thanks to all the amazing Patreons who keep us free and independent. You can join them at happyjacks.org/Patreon. A couple of bucks a month to you is what keeps the lights on around here and keeps us in beverages to consume while we're all sitting around here. So I appreciate that very much. Yeah. With that, let's go in reverse order. We'll start with you this time, Bert.
I'm Verk from the Discord, where I am most of the time. I have nothing really to plug other than game days coming up, so that's about it. Come join the Discord. It's a ton of fun. Oh, and write emails.
Burke does live in the Discord. That is your home, and we're so happy for you. I'm Emily St. James. You can find me online at Emily St. James on all major social media platforms, though I primarily am on Blue Sky and Letterboxd nowadays. You can buy my new book, Lost Back to the Island, at all major booksellers. And I don't know, that's the thing I'm going to plug this week. I have other things I could plug, but you should buy the book. It's a good book. If you like the TV show Lost, you will probably like the book. Question mark?
I did like the TV show Lost, and I probably will like the book.
There you go.
So, I'm Kadave. You'll see me here on most Mondays, but since Kimmy's not feeling great, I don't know about tomorrow. We'll see. It depends on how things are shaping up. You can also find me at CA Sith Lord on most of the things. And I'm I think there's nothing interfering with Tuesday this week, getting back into space and driving my Star Truck around hauling cargo on Twitch in the evening, usually about 6 o'clock Pacific, after the years-long Dave the Diver campaign that I was playing. But yeah, you can find me there or here. Those are the places. Thanks for joining us. We will leave you with a song tonight, Bogged Down in the Valley-O by the Merry Wives of Windsor. One of their songs that stresses me out because the tempo keeps going up and I keep getting anxiety that they're just having to breathe at the same time as singing this song so quickly. So enjoy. Have an anxiety attack with me. Night.
Bye.
Bye.